House Bill 2290, a bill to repeal Section 18.2104 of the Code of Virginia relating to punishment for conviction of second or subsequent misdemeanor larceny.
The delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate Gilbert, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen of the House, I've heard the word remiss used. I think I would likewise be remiss if I didn't mark this moment. A few years ago, we had a deal to agree to increase the larceny threshold to $500. Activists have been trying to do that for some time, and in exchange for a number of Republicans going along with that, and it may have even been long overdue, I don't know, but in exchange for that, we got some much needed restitution assurances for victims of crime. But then before the ink was even dry on the governor's signature of that bill, our colleagues on the other side came along and doubled the threshold yet again to $1,000. We then had a bill that would allow for what would essentially become automatic. The bill wasn't written to be automatic, but in many jurisdictions it will be automatic that on your first offense, misdemeanor larceny, misdemeanor being $999 worth of someone else's stuff, that you would get a pass, that you would have your charge dismissed. When the larceny threshold first went up, and when it went up again, we were told, as we pointed out, that there were professional gangs that engaged in larceny as a vocation. We were told, oh, don't worry about it. We still have this third offense. Larceny is a felony law. Well, today, if this passes, that will be no more. I thought about this in the context of my own worldview and how I come to this. As a Christian, it's one of the 10 things you just don't do. And that's true in the Judeo-Christian tradition. And then I started looking around, and obviously that is a position shared by every major world religion, that stealing things that don't belong to you is wrong and it's bad and you shouldn't do it. So the question is, why are we incentivizing it? Even if you share no religious background, the idea that we have these social norms that say, don't take things that don't belong to you, or I thought we did. What about this does anything but incentivize and continue to incentivize people to take property that does not belong to them, that someone else earned, that they paid for, that they own for their own, without any recourse? And you can say, oh, it's still against the law, and you can still go to jail. It was already very, very difficult, Madam Speaker. As a practitioner of criminal law, I can tell you, for someone who even stole at a felony threshold level, very, very difficult for that person to go to jail, even for a day. People would be surprised to know, because they think that there are all these nonviolent offenders languishing in our prisons. They would be surprised to learn that the sentencing guidelines for someone accused of first offense, maybe even second offense, felony larceny, is probation. We've seen probation walked back significantly here today, even. So what are we doing here? And I had as you might expect, Madam Speaker, I had a much more loaded and snarky version of this speech, but I earnestly want to know, what are we trying to accomplish? And I hope someone will tell us, and I hope it'll involve something other than the code words that we keep hearing over and over again, because all we're doing at the end of the day with bills like this, by removing penalties for people who steal over and over and over again, is giving them an incentive to keep doing it. And that's not good public policy, and it doesn't make Virginia a better place to live, to work, to raise a family. And I just think this is a very bad idea, Madam Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to it.
Thank you, Delegate Gilbert. The delegate from Fairfax, Chairman Plum. The delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Plum.
I'll remember to do that at some point, Madam Speaker, I promise. I cannot relate to the history that the gentleman talks about in terms of how these bills have changed, but what I can relate to from my own Judeo-Christian belief is looking at this bill, or the law as it exists now, is taking a sledgehammer to kill a gnat. What the people in the Poverty Law Center and other people who practice law in this regard tell me is that those people who are repeat offenders are the most vulnerable of our society. They're people who are looking for something to eat. They're people who are down and out. And most seriously, they're people who have a mental illness. That's the kind of people that we now say, if you, in the current law, if you commit a second offense, whether you're taking a bottle of pop, whether you're taking a candy bar, or whether you're taking a cell phone, you will end up with, as in currently, 30 days to 12 months, and for a third or any subsequent offense, you can get a class 6 felony and up to 5 years in prison. I think we ought to do something about this, Madam Chairman. Madam Speaker, I think what we ought to do is to look at what the alternatives could be to take these people who are most in need and not commit them with a felony for these kinds of takings, but rather look for ways in which there can be appropriate treatment and be in a humane way, have the law more responsive to needs. We're picking on some people who have the least opportunity to protect themselves for very minor offenses. When this bill passes and becomes law, the people of Virginia are still going to be safe in their possession, in their person. But what we will also do is have just and justice. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Delegate Plum. The delegate from Newport News, Delegate Mullen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, speaking to the bill.
Delegate Mullen, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, first, I would take offense to the idea of someone stealing pop, number one. I know I've already been in trouble so far this evening for that. But Madam Speaker, being serious about this for a moment, Madam Speaker, I have spoken on this floor before about the idea of organized groups stealing at just below the larceny threshold, and I will acknowledge the fact that I have seen that. And I would not step beyond that because I have. But Madam Speaker, I will also speak to something that I've seen more often. Madam Speaker, that is someone who's stealing beer because it's cold and it's not very pleasant to sleep underneath of a bridge abutment. I can speak to someone who is hungry, and so what they steal is food. I can speak to somebody who I've prosecuted, as I have all of these, whose next fix is the only thing that they can think of. And so what they steal is something that can get them a little bit closer to that. And Madam Speaker, this is a very complex policy issue, and I think that the delegate from Shenandoah is coming from this in a forthright fashion. And I hope that everyone in this body can understand that we are coming to this as people of goodwill. And, you know, I think of Luke chapter 23 at this point, that Christ himself found himself on Calvary with those who were thieves. I don't have a good answer to this, but I can tell you that the felonization of poverty is not the answer. And Madam Speaker, I apologize because I have been on both sides of this issue on multiple times, and I think that speaks to my own complex feelings about this. I don't know what the right answer to do is, and I would be open to other suggestions, but I can tell you that making a felon of people who have stolen candy bars or cigarettes or beer or what have you on 3 occasions is not the right answer. And so I would be open to working with any member of this body about the right way to be able to punish those organized groups of thefts, which I will acknowledge exist, while also not harming those individuals who I think even Christ himself saw as being commiserate with himself. So, Madam Speaker, I guess what I would ask is that perhaps this can be a continuation of a discussion, not an end to it, and that, Madam Speaker, as we take action today, that we can continue to find the proper way to punish those who are acting with ill intent, but also show mercy for those who are acting out of necessity. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Delegate Mullen. The delegate from Suffolk, Delegate Brewer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate Brewer, you have the floor.
I think so many of my colleagues bring up an incredible point about the charity that we must extend to others. And oftentimes as a business owner, I can't tell you how many times that I've let so many things go by. I've fed people in my community. With someone with a mental health need, I've called the CSB in the area to try to get them assistance. But we have to also ask ourselves this, and we have to balance the goodness in our hearts with the ability to also protect ourselves as business owners, as people in this community. And when people do wrong, at some point there has to be a penalty. I can't tell you how many times in my business I have turned a blind eye to theft because I don't want that on someone's record. People make mistakes. I absolutely agree with that. But at some point, we have a criminal justice system that can be kind, that can be understanding, but still have a firm hand towards the scale of justice, towards business owners, to people that are offended against. And I think we can't forget that. So as I empathize with so many of my colleagues on this, what happens to the business owner? What happens to the employee who has to deal with unfortunate situations or circumstances? I see the goodness in so many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, but continually letting something go is not always the answer. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Delegate Brewer. The delegate from Fredericksburg, Delegate Cole.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Since we were utilizing scripture, I think I had to jump in real quick and just share a few scriptures for us. Ephesians 4:28 says, "Let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor, doing honest work with his own hands, so that he may have something to share with everyone in need." Punishing the thief but not giving the thief a path to a righteous life is not the Christian path from my perspective. And jail is not just labor, giving them the promise of hope and a decent life, not economic starvation and a dire straits. I would also share with us Leviticus 19:27 says, "You shall not shave the edges of your head nor the corners of your beard." And since many of us have haircuts, I think we are in direct opposition of Leviticus. Furthermore, Jesus said, "Let him without sin cast the first stone." So if we all have haircuts, I think we got to be very careful with what we're saying about other people without giving them a place to make sure they can do better, give them rehabilitation, and setting them on a path called straight. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would urge my colleagues to support this bill.
The delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Speaking to the bill briefly.
Delegate Gilbert, you have the floor.
Madam Speaker, like the delegate from Newport News, I have been on both sides of this. I have begged for mercy for clients, and I have had to make the decision as to whether to offer mercy, and that is difficult. What I think is important to remember, we those of us who have been doing this for any length of time are certainly prone to finding the extreme example. Maybe I did that, maybe Delegate Mullen did that, maybe we both did that. But we often do that to try to frame an argument. But I think at the end of the day, most people we're talking about who do this sort of thing are not destitute and hungry. Some are. They may not be professional thieves in a thievery ring. Some are. At the end of the day, most people who steal are just prone to stealing. And again, Madam Speaker, I just think that the continued efforts to frame the people who just are prone to stealing as victims, when there are actual victims that the Delegate Brewer referred to, they are the victims. Over and over again in the special session and in this session, people who make the choice to commit a crime, to commit a wrong against their neighbor, are framed as the victims of something. And I don't know where that mindset infected the political discourse so completely as it has. That people who do those things are victims of something, and not primarily people who make conscious choices to do bad things that require society to have a consequence for that bad decision. And this is removing a significant consequence, again, for people who do it over and over and over again. And the decision to, or the effort to frame those folks as victims, I think is just very unfortunate and wrong, and will not result in a better Virginia. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Delegate Gilbert. The delegate from Alexandria, Delegate Herring.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Speaking briefly to the bill.
Delegate Herring, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to remind members or make them aware there's still a punishment for larceny. So that's the first thing. It doesn't remove punishment. And I would submit if someone's prone to stealing and taking, then that's called a mental illness. There's something else going on, and jail or prison is probably not the best place for that person. Madam Speaker, I hope that the members do support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Herring. The delegate from Richmond City, Delegate McQuinn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I rise for a motion.
Delegate McQuinn.
I call for the pending question.
Delegate McQuinn calls for the pending question. All those in favor shall say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Question is called. Shall the bill pass? Madam Clerk.
Delegate Adams, DM. Delegate Bulova. Delegate Guzman.
Yay.
Delegate Guzman votes yay. Delegate Heretic. Delegate Jones.
Aye.
Delegate Jones votes aye. Delegate Auroch.
Auroch votes nay.
Delegate Auroch votes nay.
The clerk will please close the roll.
Ayes 52, nays 45, abstentions 0.
Ayes 52, nays 45, abstention 0. The bill passes.